Hi everyone, Dave here at East Rosebud Fly and Tackle in beautiful Billings, Montana. Welcome this morning. Today I'm going to tie a caddisfly larva for you with a commonly available material. Before I get started though, I think it's important to talk a little bit about why nymphs are so important in a trout's diet. Of course, not only do they live on the bottom, but there's a phenomenon called drift. There are three different types of drift, which I'll get into. Now, not all of the insects are available in the drift. Some insects, like mayflies, particularly the Veevus, which are a swimming type, a mayfly and very active, can be very prominent in the drift. Black flies, which we don't have a lot here, but you get more northern climes or colder water, you can certainly get black flies. Chironomids, all the dipteras, the different families of dance flies, flower flies, almost all of them are aquatic larvae, and they're common in the drift. Caddisflies as well, and sometimes stoneflies. Now the three types of drift are: first is catastrophic, which is what you don't want. It's caused by pollution, a slug of overly hot water, fertility, excess fertility, can all cause a decline in the amount of insects that want to live in that area, and can cause a huge drift of insects. Fish can move if things get bad. Aquatic insects don't have that option. All they can do is let go and hope that they can get to a better place before the toxins kill them. Constant drift is also another part of drift. There's always some drift, always some insect larvae and nymphs in the drift the fish feed on. And then the last, which is more important, is behavioral drift. Behavioral drift is diurnal in character, which means right after dark and right before dawn are the heaviest concentrations of aquatic insects just drifting in the water. One study on the Green River estimated that over a 24-hour period, 170 million Veevus nymphs drifted past one location. That is a lot of biomass, and the fish really key in on that. How far do they drift? It depends on the species. Some studies have shown scuds can drift as far as 130 yards at night. Veevus mayflies 100 yards or so. Some golden stones have been shown to move from altitudes of 2,000 feet all the way down to 200 feet. So it could be substantial. And June and August are the most prominent months when drift happens. Of course, that also correlates with the highest density of aquatic insects. Why do they do that? It's thought to be a population relief valve. Insects can sense when there's crowding, competition for food. Golden stoneflies, which are carnivorous, are very sensitive to their own territory. So this can cause insects to want to move out. So that's why it's so important to be concentrating on nymphs at times, because it's a huge part of the trout's diet. Now what I'm going to be tying for you is a simple caddisfly. I'm going to be using some Firehole 633, which is just a common nymph hook. A little bit of brown Veevus thread. Wire or weighting is optional. You can weight this as heavily or non as you like. And for the body itself, just burlap, common burlap. A little bit of CCT fibers for the tail tufts to show that the anal legs, and some Mallard flank for the legs, which are always sticking out of the case, and a little bit of black ostrich herl to signify that collar of the head. I was at store last night and I found this twine, this hemp twine. Most of our Brachycentrus or Granin Mother's Day caddisflies have a very, very dark case on them, and this would be just perfect for something like that. So let's get started on this fly. I'm just going to put in a few wraps here, right about mid-shank. You don't have to cut your wire off the spool. You can use it like this, and that way you don't have any wastage. Just pack together. I like to put my wire on a bare hook instead of on top of thread. That way I can kind of slide it into position where I want it to be. Leave enough room at the head and the tail to tie off materials. And then we'll start our thread base. To prevent this wire from moving when thread wraps come in between the wire wrap, simply get your tag in, move it to the back, kind of lasso it in with your thread. That way when you wrap over the wire, that piece of thread blocks that from going in between the wire wraps. Now the tail is also a bit optional. This is the anal legs, which helps keeps the caddisfly in the case, but sometimes when they're drifting, that is exposed, adds a little bit of sparkle. This is just a few strands of golden CCT fiber. There are a lot of things you can use for this. A couple of soft wraps to tie it in. And tie it down good. I say they're very, very short. Alright, now the body is burlap. Single strand. I'm going to tie it in here in this gap at the back of the lead wrap so that I keep my body as even as I can. You need a pretty strong thread to tie this in. This is 8/0 Veevus. If you like uni thread, I'd use a 3/0. Right down to the beginning of the legs. Okay, bring your thread forward, keep it nice and smooth. Right to the beginning of the lead wraps. Now if you want a segmented effect, twist this as you wrap it. Just kind of give it another twist every time I wrap. I see that I'm slipping here. And then as I get towards the tie-off point, I go ahead and let it flatten out. Makes it a little easier, excuse my fingers, a little easier to tie down. Several very tight wraps to get it tied down, clip it off. If you like to dye materials, burlap is also very, very easy to dye. Make sure that tag end is tied down. Now if you'd like to add some realism to your caddisfly, there's always markers. You can dot a little bit to kind of break up the monotony, because they do use a variety of materials to build their cases, whatever is available. And then I like to roughen it up a little bit to give it a little more texture. This is just a piece of broken hacksaw blade. And it doesn't take much. Just kind of go around and break some of those fibers out. If you have one of those stainless steel, I think they call them, what do they call those? Those stainless steel brushes, tearing brushes I think is what it's called. Anyway, do that as much as you like. I'm going to be using for the head a single piece of black ostrich herl. Cut a couple of inches off of the tip. To get this to really perform for you, you want to tie it in with the herl. Ostrich herl and peacock herl are both in a Y shape. They don't come off the sides like hackle does. So when you tie it in, make sure you have the herl on top, facing you. That way when you wrap it, the quill is forward, which makes the ostrich stand up nicely and makes the tie off nice and clean. It only takes a couple of wraps. And then finally, the legs are always out of the case, always. I'll show you a method called the default method of putting legs on. If you have a hard time putting legs on the bottom of the fly, this is black mallard flank. Simply get a tip of this, remove it. I have it intentionally long. Take a couple of soft wraps here just to hold it, and then you can pull this to get the length that you want. Okay, Defoe, D-E-F-O-E. Put this off flush. Nice thread head on there, and then whip finish it. Oh, another common material is a fly tire. I'm always keeping my eye out for interesting materials. I think any dedicated fly tire will tell you they do the same thing, because you just never know. And imagine how many caddis you can tie with a burlap bag. More than a lifetime's worth, I'm sure. But anyway, there's the burlap caddis. If you're looking for an easy caddis pattern, you happen to have some burlap around, this is an easy one to put together. Thanks for joining in. We'll see you next time.